Dan, Tim, you ready? Okay. Good evening. Prior to the start of the scheduled Plan Commission meeting tonight, there will be a public hearing to be held in front of the Plan Commission and the Town Board to solicit public input on a proposed ordinance to create Planned Development District Number 1 of the Town Zoning Code. The regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting will begin immediately following the conclusion of the public hearing. Tonight's public hearing, we've got a set of rules that we've used in the past, but I'll just reiterate them for everyone's benefit. First, you must sign in and present a speaker card to the town clerk when you'd like to speak. You should speak at the microphone up top so that everyone in the room and everyone at home can hear you. You must state your name and address for the record, and all comments should be directed to the chairperson. Speakers can provide comments and ask questions and speak into the record. However, there will be no dialogue between members of the Plan Commission, the Town Board, or staff with the speaker. Members of the Plan Commission and Town Board may ask clarifying questions only. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Be respectful of those who wish to speak by being concise and not repeating comments previously made by others whenever possible. And certainly just saying a ditto or me too would be appreciated. A speaker's time may not be deferred to another speaker. Each speaker may only speak once. Please turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices during the meeting. And then before the public comments of the public hearing, we're going to have a presentation by our town planner to go over the new changes to the ordinance. And then we're going to open it up to questions from the town board who are in attendance tonight. So, Tim?
All right, thank you. So first I'm going to give you a little bit of background and a little bit about the purpose for the hearing. In 2019, the town did determine and made certain lands as mixed use on the town land use plan that is currently in place. And then the Plan Commission, to allow for more of a comprehensive development on any mixed use site versus what I would call piecemeal development, which is on large parcels. If you did a piecemeal, you'd do it small parcels at a time. The Plan Commission determined that the town should have a zoning district that can be used in conjunction with the mixed-use land use. Now, in our current code, we have specific zoning districts, residential, commercial, business, industrial. Each district really follows the same general subsections that I've placed up on the screen here. It's statement of intent, use regulations, building location, building height, and area regulations. The proposed ordinance does include these items, as well as some other subsections that provide some additional requirements for this specific mixed-use ordinance. So those sections include applicability, definitions, procedure, density, signage regulations, parking regulations, dumpster enclosures, road layout, cul-de-sac length, and development agreement. We've been working on this document for a long time. There's been a lot of changes in what was potentially going to be on this site, and so that's why we have a substantial amount of regulations within this particular ordinance. The applicability for this ordinance is the approximate 152-acre parcel referred to in the code, if you read the code, as the eligible district. It's generally located east of Glen Cove Road, north of Gulf Road, and west of Elmhurst Road, currently owned by the members of the Thomas family. Adoption of this ordinance is not an approval for a specific development. I just want to make that clear. This ordinance is not for any specific development. What it does is that it creates a zoning district similar to what you would see R1, R2 in the code. It creates that district. If a developer wants to rezone this particular area to this district, it's called Planned Development District Number 1, PDD Number 1, the owner or the developer must come before the town and make that request, and then there's a public hearing related to the zoning change. So when an applicant really wants to develop the land, has a plan to do that, the first step is going to be to file a rezoning petition, and then there's a number of things that must be included with that, and that's including a general development plan, and that's going to include a site drawing, open space and natural resources plan, a traffic impact analysis, a road access plan, a sanitary sewer plan, and that's going to tell us what the impact is on the existing sanitary sewer system, a water study so we can understand the impacts on any wells in the area, a preliminary stormwater management plan, a bike and pedestrian plan, and an active recreation plan. Now there's quite a bit of additional items that are necessary for this general development plan, more so than we've requested for other developments in the town. If the rezoning is approved by the town and the county, because all rezonings have to go to the county, the applicant must then, if it gets approved by the town and county, then the applicant must come in with what we call a specific development plan. And that contains detailed construction level plans that the Plan Commission and the town board would review and consider. So I'm just going to go through some of the highlights. The uses allowed under the Planned Development District include single-family homes and 2 to 4 unit condominiums. No industrial, no commercial, no institutional in that. The density, the maximum number of units stated in the code for the eligible district is 250 units. The lot sizes vary based on the zone. There's 4 different zones, which I'll get to. I'll have a map up at the end here that shows the 4 zones in which it's located, and they range between 10 and 20,000 square feet. If it's a condominium, it could be a much larger parcel on which the condominium plat and the condominium development would take place on. The building location, we have setbacks that range between 25 and 35 feet from the right-of-way line. The right-of-way line is located 33 feet typically from the center line of the road. So our roads are typically, it's going to be 12 to 14 feet wide on a half. So basically the setback from what I would call the edge of the road is probably going to be somewhere in the range of 45 to 50 feet. Side offsets range between 10 and 15 feet. The rear offset is 20 feet. The wetland setback is 75 feet, and any setback from the floodplain is 35 feet. The height of the buildings will match what we allow for the height in every other residential district in the town, which is 30 feet for the maximum base height. That height is measured from the lowest point around the house to the eave. The current code actually allows an increase in the overall height with approval of the Plan Commission, and then if there's increases in the offsets and setbacks. So there is an overall height, but there's also a base height of 30 feet. Just so everybody understands that base height is just to the eave. We have open space regulations for this development. If we're looking at a couple of different elements of open space, one is for the overall development. So if someone comes in, does a portion of the lot in a subdivision, then that has to meet that development has to meet an open space, and that could range from anywhere from 30% to 60%, depending on the zone and the development. If individual lots are created, there is also an individual lot open space, and that means green space in the town for each lot, and that's 60 to 70%. All of you that own individual lots out there, there is an open space percentage on each lot that limits as to what you can do as far as hard surfaces on your lot. So this subdivision has the same type of regulations as well, or this potential development, this code, the creation of this code has that same requirement. As I said, there's going to be a map I'm going to put up that identifies the natural areas, and those are going to be designated for preservation. There's landscape buffers that are part of this code that are required along the sides of the road, sides of the eligible district that are adjacent to the roads. Glen Cove Road has a 100-foot buffer, Gulf Road 100-foot, and Elmhurst Road 50 feet. As with other developments, if a development comes in, the owner and developer will have to enter into what we call a development agreement. And that sets forth all the regulations in regards to developing the land. This is no different than what we do for normal developments. It requires a financial surety so that if they start building the roads, there's money to back it up to finish the roads, so that there's no cost for the town to finish roads. All costs associated with the development are borne by the owner developer. There's no cost to the town. Any time that I have for my engineering reviews or inspection on the site, those are all charged back to the developer. So it's no different than what we've done in other subdivisions in the town. So as I said, map 1 is going to basically reference the zones, and map 2 depicts the open space requirements. So this is map 1. So you got Glen Cove Road on the west, Elmhurst on the east, and I-94 to the south. Zone 1 is up in the northwest corner here off of Crooked Creek. Zone 2, Zone 3, and then Zone 4. This map is included in the ordinance. It will be part of the ordinance, so that's not going to change. The ordinance references these zones within the ordinance. If you've been reading it, I'm sure many of you have looked it over. This map, which was a conglomerate, was actually prepared by Waukesha County, indicates our buffers around the sides here. And then it also, these areas where the light bluish green color is, those are wetlands that were mapped in 2010. The darker green are environmental corridor areas that were provided by Sewer Pack from their 2015 information. The wetlands and the environmental corridor will have to be further delineated once a particular development comes in. They could get larger, they could get smaller, but it will have to be specifically delineated in order to determine exactly what has to be preserved. And so this has there's some flexibility within this particular map here. However, this one depicts what we know of with the information we have right now. The red stars that you see on here indicate areas where there are tree lines that a little section of them may have to come out so that we can get vehicles or roads to go through there at various locations. So that's all I have for this. I'll turn it back to Kevin.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I'd like to open it up to the town board members. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Tim at this time.
1,200 square feet, I believe, is the single-family limit in here. Is that correct, Tim? The one-story structure, 1,200 square feet?
1,200 is the minimum single-family house size. And
Where was that number derived from? Is
that is what is in our current code for single-family homes for all districts.
I spent some time, I believe that most of this ordinance was altered based off the comments from the last Plan Commission meeting. Is that correct? Presentation from Newman the last time.
That was part of it. There's been a lot of input from the county as well on a number of aspects of the changes. But yes, a lot of the changes are reflective of the presentation. So for example, we've taken out the multifamily, the residential or the rental properties. That was a decision that staff made with input from the chair because both the developer wasn't that excited about it, and to be honest, we heard the groan in the audience at the last meeting on rental properties. And so all multifamily rentals are pulled out of the ordinance.
Thank you. I'm just trying to mirror the two images of what we saw last time versus what I'm reading in here. Is that the right way to be thinking about it?
We don't have an update from the Newman companies in terms of what the proposed layout would be. The ones we saw last month or 2 months ago, were based on substantially more units. I think, as everyone knows, they had one at 260 and one at 279 or something. So we don't know what the exact layout is, but the concepts of having the 4 different zones remain intact. And the densities in the ordinance are obviously denser with smaller lots along I-94, and then less dense in Zone 1 and 2.
The Newman, when he was here, referenced specifically the Lake Country Village, which I have spent some time in over the past couple weeks, driving around in different parts of the day just to get a feel for, it was his example. So I just wanted to understand visually what it might be. My comment about the square footage is that the Lake Country Village uses 1,400 square feet instead of 1,200 square feet for the 10,000 units, and that may be something that the
10,000 square foot.
10,000 square foot lots have a minimum size of 1,400 square foot homes, which I thought was a noteworthy difference between what we see in this subdivision he referenced versus what is in our.
Well, as Tim mentioned, though, the 1,200 is in all of our
Which is a
existing
good answer to the
zone
question, yes.
codes.
And I think that's.
And I
why
do believe in the Newman presentation, he indicated most of his units would be 1,800 to 2,200 square feet lot
Yeah.
houses, so.
The second thing I noticed was that the Lake Country Village has a much smaller percentage of 10,000 square foot lots than is currently proposed in Zone 3 and 4. My concern is around the perhaps percentage or overall density that this ordinance has specifically related to 10,000 square foot lots. So,
We don't have a hard count of any size lots in here, other than the 8 20,000 square foot lots in Zone 1. There's just the overall density count, and, you know, and we're waiting for whatever the plan would
lack of a
be.
hard count is what concerns me. I want to know what that percentage breakdown is. And,
Certainly, and that would
be a
be,
good observation.
that would be part of the
Now,
general development plan, would require that high-level site plan so that you could determine how many units were, for example, condos, which don't have a lot, or have a lot size that's 40 acres, but has 30 condos on it, or the 10,000, or the 15,000, or the 20,000. So we'll have to wait to see what those are. And obviously, the general development plan has to be approved by the planning commission and the town board at the time it's submitted, in order for the rezone to occur. And a public, well, it's a public hearing because it's a rezone, so all of those issues will get addressed at the time of the rezone application, which is when the general development plan gets submitted for review and approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just curiously, under the definitions here, you've got the definition of the traffic impact analysis, the sewer study, the road access plan, kind of the tests, right, that we're looking for to make sure that the development's gonna meet. But there is not one for the water study. I guess, is there a particular reason that one's left out, or is it, you got it obviously in the procedure section, but not in the definition section?
Yeah, I think because we have it defined or explained a little bit in more detail in the procedure section on page 4, I think we felt that was an adequate location to show where that is. I mean, it could be put in the definition with the other ones, but.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't an oversight of,
No.
The traffic impact analysis seems to have a little bit more, like, of what they're looking for like a pass or like acceptable, right? And just making sure that we're not missing the opportunity to make sure that's in there for the water study portion.
I think the concepts are the same in terms of how the town board would review it. Some of this came from the county, and the county was, to be honest, much more focused on traffic issues than they were, you know, the water and sewer. Obviously, Sewer PAC has the sewer in hand, so there'll be a number of state and county and local agencies looking at the plans when they come in.
But the procedure specifically requires that the water study shall demonstrate that the development shall not have adversely impact private wells in the area or other natural resources, so.
I'm just, like I
Yeah.
said, making sure that we weren't missing an opportunity where that needed to be either further defined or was missed, so.
Is that good? Okay.
Good stuff.
Okay, at this point, we'll open it up to the public. As I mentioned earlier, if you wish to speak, just hand in your card to Dan and come up, state your name and address. And Dan will run a 3-minute clock.
Okay. Can we just make a comment on?
Sure, go ahead.
Before Terry starts us off here? One of the things that staff will be doing is we will, if there are questions out there, what we will be doing is we will be writing down those questions. And being a public hearing, we're not supposed to engage with those that are speaking or with the audience. And so we will try to answer questions at the time that it
During the
comes-
Plan Commission meeting
At the
itself.
Plan Commission meeting, yeah. But Dan and I will be marking out, or trying to list questions as much as we can.
Super, thank you, because I might have, some of these might need just clarifications. I'm Terry Mahoney, Ogden, address W290 and 2171 Happy Hollow Road in Pewaukee. Here you go, Dan, thank you. So thanks for listening, and it's been a while, folks. So I could talk for more than 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to just be succinct. Page 1, I struggled immediately. At the bottom of page 1 of the proposed ordinance, I highlighted a bunch of things specifically, but what really caught me off guard was this, towards the bottom, will not, the town hereby determine the zoning amendments will not violate the spirit or intent of the zoning code for the town of Delafield. Okay, now, come on, guys. This is exactly not what we are in the town of Delafield. I mean, nowhere do I see here, it's a complete violation, not even just like the spirit, it's a violation and the spirit. So then I printed out the zoning districts, and you guys, if you go print this all out, you'll see what we're all about as the town of Delafield. We are not 10,000 square foot lots, and I know I asked for a site plan, we don't have them yet, but if you look at our zoning districts for the town, we've got R1, is 1.5 acre lots, then we go to 1 acre, and then we go to 30,000, then we go 20,000, which is Lake District, but there's nothing less than 20. And so 10,000, 15, what are you going to call that one? RM, matchbox, residential matchbox? I mean, it's not here, and it's not who the town is. And that, to me, I mean, it's almost like it was in my face when I saw that. Another little thing with that, I was reading about it, they talk about the width is going to be 75 wide. There's nowhere in our town where we have 75 wide lots. We range from 120 from our smallest lots wide to 200. And again, these are just our residential lots. This isn't including the ag lots, but, so those are just some glaring differences that I wanted to point up just when I mentioned that. Again, when you jump over even to page 3, you talk about the different densities. And again, all these things that are on page 3 aren't permitted. And I know that that's what you're trying to change, but that's what we're asking you not to change. That's why we live in the town of Delafield. On page 4, we even talk more about open space. Tim was just talking about all the open space is going to be 60 to 70%. When you look in the zoning pages, page 4, you're going to see the bulk of the stuff is 85, guys. I mean, granted, we've got different ones that will range to 60 to 70, but all the ones that you didn't even mention that one, Tim. It's 85% for open space. And again, I'm just looking at R1 and R2, and 85%. It's written right here on page 4 of the. Again, I encourage everybody here to just check it out, just because this is what we are. And that kind of leads me to, we've been here for a while. And I go back to what I was saying Ron and Kevin, I've had words with you guys on this in the past, and I just feel bad that we don't even have to be here. I mean, the people who did these ordinances did them for a reason. And I know you guys came in and think you're doing something good, but we don't. And I know, Ron, you and I have said, you told me that, that you wouldn't live on this side of the lake, and that is your prerogative. And I'm going to keep saying it because you said it to me. But you represent the whole town of Delafield, and this side of the lake is just as valuable, and we shouldn't have to have what you guys are trying to put in here. Kevin, you said the same thing to me too. You got involved when the subdivision behind you was getting going. You want to make sure nothing like this was going to happen. So I'm just asking you guys, be leaders, and all for our town board and for our planning commission, don't cave. Don't, you don't have to follow what they're saying. Listen what your constituents want. We are the town of Delafield. Amen. Okay.
That was one rule I forgot to mention. Please refrain from applause or other reactions that are disruptive and not productive. Thanks.
Good evening, Peter Ogden, W290 and 2171 Happy Hollow Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've been living here since 1987, and I don't believe that we've ever entertained a 10 or a 15,000 square foot lot. I think that's probably a true statement, Tim, and you could verify that. Please do. And so I just think if we could completely remove anything that says 10 or 15,000 square feet in this document. They're located on pages 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Keep in mind that the 20,000 square foot lot that I think you are allowing, you're taking the width of that lot from 120 feet to 100 feet. Right, Tim? Is that correct? In this ordinance? Yeah, well, that's also, if you just look on page 9, please, 10A, it's open space. It would be great if you would change the 60% to 70% for the condos. And then just let's talk about the condos. You referenced the dumpster corral. I mean, think about it, you guys. If you wake up on a given morning and you've got the waste management truck pulling into your association, lifting a big, ton of things, shaking it, backing up, and it's squeaking, and it's just not, it's not what we want in the town. Do you? I mean, think about that. And then you reference parking. You've got 20 spaces on parking. I mean, 20 spaces, that's a huge parking lot. So please, you could limit the parking to, say, 5 and maybe 10, and then really landscape the heck out of it. But by lowering the percentage to 70%, it'll just, I think, be a better fit. Thank you very much.
Hi there. Jim Frett, N19 W29056, Gulf Ridge North. Thanks for having us. Thanks for setting this up and listening. Appreciate it. As we've discussed, this has been going on for a while. I'll hit some points that we've hit before in previous sessions. I'll keep it a little higher level, just overall numbers here. Bottom line is we're here because the family believes that the land is, they're entitled to more money for the land. That's why we're trying to come to some compromise, which again, we don't necessarily understand why we have to come to a compromise for this. If the builders can make money at $250, then at a lower price tag, they can make money at a lower number of units, clearly. At $250, it's still almost 250% higher density than the surrounding neighborhoods. It's also about 500% higher than other neighborhoods that reside on the expressway, Dover Bay, the Arbors. So again, we're making progress. This is good. I think it's come a long way, but we still have some work to do. As far as questions go, and actually I'm going to throw up some numbers here of recent subdivisions. Since 2004, Dover Bay, 0.49 units per acre. We're at 1.64 with this current plan. So just to throw out numbers here. The Enclave in Delafield, 0.32. Shepherd's Pass, 0.29. Woodbridge Estates, 0.53. Hunt Club Farms, 0.19. Hawks Haven, 0.64. And White Oak, 0.28. That's all the subdivisions in the last roughly, almost 20 years. Nothing's close to 1.64, not even the same universe, really. So again, just a few questions to consider as we're discussing this. Again, if one of the things that was brought up was fiscally, and fortunately our town's doing well from a fiscal perspective. So I don't know that anyone's done an analysis to say that 250 units will be better fiscally for our town than say 100 or 150. So does anyone really have numbers behind that? Traffic study. So ultimately we're going to have more traffic. We realize any development's going to have more traffic, but 250 units is significantly more than what we've seen, and we know we have traffic concerns in this area already. Number 4, what about the sewer system? It was near capacity with the heavy rains. Again, a development that's 2.5 to 5 times the density. How is that going to impact the sewers? And what is the criteria for the studies, all of these studies? At what point, if it's already an ordinance, it's going to be a lot harder to back away from something than if we get it right in the ordinance up front. And then just lastly, city lot sizes was brought up. We're a town. We're not a city. We're a town built with wide open spaces. Again, don't understand why we have to compromise that here as part of this development. Thanks again for listening.
Al Napper, in the 16 W29838 Brookstone Circle. Obviously, Terry and Jim and Peter do an excellent job of crunching all the numbers and looking at a lot of those pieces of it. I guess what I'd like to mention again is, having been here for most of these discussions and the things that have been ongoing since 2019, I would just like to once again reiterate, as they have done with some numbers, we're a single-family neighborhood on 3 sides, large homes, large lots, and the development needs to reflect what's on all sides of us. I live off of Glen Cove and use Glen Cove Gulf almost daily. The traffic right now is on given days, for some reason Friday, it's already pretty nasty. One of the other things that I guess I am still troubled by is, if you look at Zone 3 and Zone 4, consistently we hear that we have to have smaller lots, smaller homes, condos in that area because, quote unquote, nobody really wants to live along the interstate. In our High Point subdivision, we have a large swale that's been dug, we have a large berm, we have trees, we have everything there, and 26 of us think it's a pretty damn good place to live. So again, I'm concerned that you've never considered any kind of a dirt berm, foliage, etc., along the interstate, Zone 3, Zone 4. Lastly, just a small thing, but along Glen Cove, we heard that there could be a berm with foliage, et cetera, et cetera. Now I see, weasel words start to work their way into this, and obviously people have studied it a lot closer than me, but now all of a sudden along Glen Cove, there may be usage of a berm, but there would be ground cover trees and shrubs for sure. So again, there's a concern that the longer this goes on, the squishier it gets. But again, thanks for the work, thanks for the listening, and for all that you're doing. Thanks.
Good evening, I'm Jerry Janzer. I live at West 307 North 1677 Shadowwood Point in Delafield. Unlike some other people here tonight, I do not live right near this particular development. However, I have lived in the town of Delafield for 30 years. Also, my day job is an attorney and a real estate. Boy, that was short. I knew it was coming up. Just kidding, Tim. I didn't, boy, yeah. No, my day job, I'm a real estate development attorney, and I've represented a lot of developers, not only in this community, but others going back as far as 1988. And as I said, I've lived here for 30 years. I'm just going to be blunt. First of all, you guys have done a great job at moving it forward from where it once was. It was horrible in the beginning. It's getting closer to something that makes some sense. But I'm going to be blunt and say, anybody that says this is compatible with the town of Delafield it's just not possible to make that statement. If you look at the residential zoning districts we have, as been stated here by many people tonight, we're nowhere close to any of the ones we have now, both in terms of sizes of the lots, the setbacks, and the width of the lots. Many comments have made about the smallest lot we allow right now in the town of Delafield is 20,000 square feet. Interestingly enough, the definitions in this ordinance proposed are inconsistent with the definitions in the current ordinance. The town ordinance right now defines a low-density lot is greater, a low-density development is greater than 1 acre, and a medium density is 20,000 square feet. Here in this ordinance, you define low as 20,000 square feet, totally incompatible with the current ordinance. You define medium as 10 and 15,000 square feet. They're not even in our code. That would have to be high density if it has any definition whatsoever to be compatible with the current town of Delafield code. In terms of the setbacks, we have 25 feet. And I know it said from the right-of-way, but put it in perspective, between me and Mr. Kranick is about 25 feet, maybe 30. So that's your setback from your right-of-way. With the average car length being 16 feet, you maybe can get one car on your land without going onto the right-of-way, with maybe at most one. The 25 feet is half of what we allow in the minimum right now in any of our zoning districts. The minimum's 50-foot setback. We're going to 25. The minimum lot width is 120 square feet. We're going to 75. This is nowhere near anything we have in the town of Delafield. And then I look and say, well, why are you trying to do this, okay? The only thing I can think of is you're helping two people, the lot owner, who is going to get more for his land, and the developer is going to make more money. We live in a great world here in Delafield. We have a great environment, great rural character, and very low taxes. If anybody thinks this is going to lower taxes, I will make that bet with you right now, because when you add this density, you're going to have more need for public service in terms of crime, more fire protection, and it will never be made up for in the value you create, because you're decreasing the value of the surrounding area by putting this development surrounded by higher priced properties. And the last thing I'll say, there's been some conversations about, we don't want a sound barrier ever in Delafield. By moving one of the things the DOT looks at in terms of sound barriers, the amount of residential units impacted within so many distance of the freeway. You're putting all of that residential district in that high density right near the freeway. That will make it more likely that you will have a sound barrier put up. So thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate the time.
He wants,
My name is George Irwin. I am a resident of the city of Brookfield. I'm an attorney. I represent the Thomas family, and I want to just kind of briefly address, I think, some of the misconceptions about this ordinance and what its purpose is and how it's actually going to work. This is an overlay zoning. It does not mean that this property is going to have to be developed this way. The reference to other zoning categories within the community continue. If a developer wants to take on 150 acres and achieve all of the things that this ordinance achieves in terms of open space requirements, trails, all of the studies, all of that work that goes into trying to master plan that, this ordinance works as an overlay to achieve that. That does not mean that the existing land use plan of commercial uses can't occur on this property. If a rezoning request is sought for commercial uses on this property, consistent with the existing zoning code that you're making reference to, that can occur. If we want to go with larger lots, we can under the existing code. But if a developer wants to embrace this kind of project and all of the things that go with it, the trade-off is a little more density. Now, you may debate with me about what a little more density means, but it occurs in the context of a rezoning, a comprehensive plan, and that plan lays out how the roads lay out. It lays out the open space. It lays out the landscaping plan. It lays it out, and then the community has an opportunity to look at it from a public policy standpoint and say, do we want this or not in a rezoning request? That does not mean, however, that if this ordinance is approved, that tomorrow the land use plan can't be followed, which is a commercial use. And I also want to just briefly touch on the last 4 years. When this was originally looked at, we looked at the original land use plan for this site, and the first 1,000 feet was commercial uses. And when we looked at those commercial uses and we land planned it, we said, well, all right, let's go with industrial. No, we can't have industrial. No way. But the trade-off is let's put some multifamily in that first 1,000 feet. Okay, family group, okay. well, wait a minute, we can't have multifamily there. That's not compatible with our community, but we can live with senior housing. Well, we can't live with senior housing, we can't have that. Well, what about some smaller lots? And we went through all of that process for the last 4 years, and the goal was to try and find something that made sense. So from our perspective, we worked hard as a family group trying to get something done here, where a big property is developed.
George. Time's up, George. Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Get up there, quick.
I'm a little slow on the draw there. Name is Ron Feder. We live at N20 W29446 Oakton Road. I left my notes there. Okay, so many of the important steps have been taken to correct this, and I guess you could all agree to that, and I think many of us would agree to that. Okay.
Put it up.
Okay. We would agree with many of the things that you've offered, and there definitely have been improvements in what you're suggesting. But one of the really fundamental fallacies I see in this process is we're talking about developing 250 units. Well, one of the basic questions is how do we service it with a sewer and water? And before I would be able to say yes to a size of a development potential, now you're just opening the door for 250 units. Before you open the door that far, what's the potential for capacity deprivation in our sanitary district? I have not been able to find out if anybody's inquired about that or if the town or engineering have determined what the actual capacity of that pipe is. So before we would approve anything that has anything to do with quantity of residential units, I would like to make sure that we have enough sewer capacity to do that. And that likewise, water is going to be local wells. We haven't actually seen any statistics on how much that's going to affect our aquifer. Are they going to put a deep well in at 400 or 600 feet, or are they going to go with the shallow wells, or is it going to come from the town? But these questions need to be answered before we go ahead and say, yes, put that many homes in that space. Of course, many of the comments that were made prior to me being here and speaking are very valid. It's not the type of subdivision that we would like to have in our neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Kathy Gudenkunst. I live at on Glen Cove Road. I've lived in the town of Delafield, to tell you exactly how old I am, 60 years. And I suspect I'm one of the oldest residents in the room this evening. I spoke at the very first meeting on this particular development, and I went through the ordinance section by section by section. And Mr. Fitzgerald and I got into a little colloquy about what the ordinance meant. And Mr. Troy, to his credit, said, she's right. The ordinance wasn't well crafted because it just wasn't. That's how things happen. But what concerns me about this development is this is not the town of Delafield. What does our motto on our letterhead say on our town website when you go to it? Residential, recreational, responsible. I appreciate the Thomas family wants to sell their property. I appreciate that they would like to make a profit. But it's not this town's job to make sure that we can make that happen for them. Couple points about this ordinance. As everyone else has already pointed out, there are two subdivisions along I-94. I was at a plan commission meeting, and one of the new members didn't even know that Dover Bay is across the street. John Spheres developed that subdivision in 1980. If you look at that subdivision, there was a home that was recently constructed on the outlot in the last, I'd say, 36 months. People still want to live in Dover Bay. As people who live in High Point pointed out, houses go up for sale there and they get sold immediately. People will live along I-94. The market will drive that. So when I look at this ordinance, the 10,000 square feet in Zone 3, which abuts Glen Cove, which is a dead-end road, for those of you who haven't driven it, is a really poor idea because that's going to generate about 130 units. 130 units. That's more than High Ridge in total. Then we look at the ordinance on page 7 and we talk about setbacks and rear offsets. 20 feet rear offset. This room is approximately 34 feet wide if you count the tiles. So the back of your home and the home across the way are going to be 6 feet further apart than this room. Think about that. 40 feet between houses. I would just ask that you take time, and I appreciate that you guys have been at this. I was on the study group. I've been at this for a long time, too. But this group of people, they believe in the town of Delafield, and they believe in the leadership that's going to do the right thing for their community. And 10,000 square foot lots isn't the right thing. 20,000 square foot lots has been the standard in the town, and we would ask that you adopt that for this site. And just for the record, people have offered to buy this. This site has not sat with nothing for the last 15, 20 years. And we've heard that. And the last thing I want to say is this. We keep hearing at every meeting, it's not industrial, it's not this, it's not that. Whoever thought the town of Delafield should have an industrial corridor along that patch of property doesn't know the town of Delafield. Thank you.
Hello, Nick Berkey, N15W2992 Brookstone Circle. Once again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Fairly new to this process, moved to the area about 2.5 years ago, and then started getting engulfed in these discussions with my neighbors. And I think just sitting back today, and thank you for your efforts, this is not an easy task for anyone, but I think, you know, the nail was hit on the head by the Thomas lawyer. It's not our job or the town to make sure that it's one developer can take this on as a master plan. If that's not in the cards for them, that's on the cards. But once again, it's not on the town's responsibility. I think we're all here willing to, based upon what I could hear, you guys have been doing this for 4 years, it sounds like people are willing to work towards a common plan. And if that means you have to find the right buyer then to develop it, that's what needs to be done. That's, once again, that's not the Plan Commission's responsibility. That's not the town or the residents. And then lastly, being in all these meetings, where are the people in favor of this outside of the same group of people that you've seen time and time again for 4 years? I mean, if you guys want to go to sleep at night and pass this, then good luck with that. But I don't think that's going to sit well with anyone. This is not what anyone's asked for, and it's been clearly communicated. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Hi, my name's Debbie Balistreri, N21W29706 Glen Cove Road. We moved here a couple of years ago. This is our second summer. We've really dreamt about being in Lake Country for a long time. So when we got here and started hearing about what was going to happen, it kind of, you know, shattered some of our beliefs. And while I was sitting there, I Googled this Lake Country Village that we're talking about. The last Newman developers said they wanted to mirror. If you look at the topical, it's like a cookie cutter development. That's really not the town of Delafield. And so I guess I'm just not sure why you would even consider it. And again, it's not the residents that should be helping fund the sale of property. You know, I just can't imagine this. If you have 250 households, that means at least 500 cars that are going to be parked or driving on those roads. So it's just, I just wanted to voice my opinions, but thank you very much. We're new to this, too.
Hi, Gary Wagner, 29504 East Glen Cove Road. And I have some of the same concerns, but maybe I'll highlight them a little relative to the zoning It was in there about the water, do a water study. It's fairly open, undefined. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of demand, the higher the density, and we're all concerned because we all got wells, and you've put double the density near us, then if there's a study done and, yeah, so it doesn't work, you know, oh, you ran out of water, too bad. There's no recourse, so we're all concerned about that. And whether it's commercial, if it's commercial, that might be even worse. You know, if you're building something, some high-density housing on the frontage road that's using tons of water, that may be worse than the residential. We really don't know. The other question, looking at the zone 3 and 4 and what was proposed by the developer, the density just keeps getting greater and greater. Zone 1, I don't think anybody's got a problem with zone 1. But then 2, obviously we get much higher density. We go to 4, and that's going up to 1.66 units per acre, which everybody was complaining about. And I looked at what's proposed for zone 3, or maybe again, yeah, zone 3, it's at 2.93 units per acre with the condos or multifamilies. It's just unbelievable, completely different than what we're expecting in Delafield. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing tonight? Okay. You only get to speak once.
Wider is only 50 feet setback on Elmwood. Part of it's 100 and there you there is down 50, sorry.
Anyone else wish to speak? Okay. Close the public hearing. We'll call the Planning Commission meeting to order. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2, approval of the minutes from September 6, 2022.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item 3, communications, still none, I assume?
Correct.
Okay. Item 4, unfinished business, none. Item 5A, new business, consideration and possible action on a recommendation to the town board to adopt an ordinance to create Plan Development District Number 1 in the town zoning code. Tim, you were keeping a note of questions. I've got a few notes that I think we can address based on the public hearing comments, but I don't know that there were any specific questions that they were looking for answers, were there? I've got things to talk about too.
You got some?
But, do you want to go then,
Go
Jennifer?
ahead. I'll let you. Those are comments more than questions?
These
or-
were questions that people asked. They, was a 10,000 or 15 square foot lot ever entertained? Can we remove a 10,000 or 15 thousand square foot lot?
So
Those are, yeah,
There's
those
a-
are the
I'm
policy decisions, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just reading what.
there's never been, I mean, we don't have a code that allows less than 20,000, so there's never been someone come in with less than that.
Although we have a lot of lots that are less than 20,000
Other than there's
square.
specific condominiums that if you would take just the cluster of the condominium, it's probably less than that, you know. I mean, it's probably from a density standpoint.
Yeah, the
Does that make
condos on the
sense?
lake are, I think, 6 units per acre.
Yeah, I think that to answer that question, though, you need to talk about, like, we're the plan commission, so from a planning perspective, the reason we're even, like, maybe even entertaining 10,000 square foot lots is because, to your point, they can come in and, you know, plat a condo on, you know, one lot and put a whole bunch of units there, or you get a little bit smaller lot size, and you can drive more open space. And overall, you know, I mean, this is just the ordinance that we're looking at. We're not even looking at developments or anything. This is just an ordinance to, like, build the framework to, you know, start, you know, the dominoes of, you know, somebody coming in with a plan. But I think, you know, the 10,000 square foot lots argument is we're hearing that the market, people don't want to maintain large yards anymore. People don't want to live in large yards anymore. And, you know, and
please.
but you know, from a planning perspective, I mean, I think that's why it's being entertained in the ordinance.
Yeah, the diversity of housing construct that we talked about at the last meeting, where you want different types of houses to attract different types of residents, rather than just have one type house in the entire town.
And the issue's going to be addressed again when we have the specific site plan and we have the zoning petition filed, and we can address the lot size at that time as well. This is an overlay.
Yeah. I do want to address, because it came up a couple of times, the traffic, the water, and the sewer are, to be honest, the three reasons we wrote this ordinance. Right now, that property could be developed as a 152-acre condo, and under R3 zoning, they could get 257 units on that property as an R3 condo. Today. And
Under the existing code.
Under the existing code. We don't want them to, because we wouldn't get a water study, we wouldn't get a traffic study, we wouldn't get a sewer study, we wouldn't get trails, we wouldn't get anything that this ordinance allows us to get. And, you know, questions come, is there enough sewer there? We have had conversations with sewer pack. The current sewer pack allows capacity for 7 people per acre, so a little over 1,000 people on this development, I think was the number in the ordinance. So we've had those preliminary conversations, but again, we can't decide if there's enough water, sewer, or traffic issues without seeing what the specific plan is. And the way the ordinance is written, the process, the way the ordinance is written is we see a traffic study and it doesn't work, we change where the exits are to the subdivision. We see a sewer study that shows an issue, we reduce the number of units that are available for the developer. That's the way the process has to work, because we can't do these types of studies in a vacuum. Even traffic studies, we've seen the statistics. Smaller houses with 2 older people have a very different traffic pattern than large houses with 6 kids. You know, the number of trips per day go from 9 to 19. So we need to know the types of housing that will be there and the types of residents that we'll have in order to do a legitimate traffic study. So those are the things that we insisted on being in here. And the cost is quite substantial to the developer. And yes, they can do it piecemeal, but here's what a piecemeal development could look like. You'd end up with another church, almost guaranteed, and probably a school, because an institutional use would be an allowed use. We've already had one school approach us about taking 40 acres of this farm and putting 1,000 students on it with traffic of a school every day. The town said, no, we don't want to see a school on this parcel. But piecemeal development, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see some office buildings, some churches, some schools, and then housing to the north. That's what we think we'll see, and it can happen. But if we have this, we at least know what we're going to get. And so that's the primary reason we've been focusing on this.
Well, plus no ordinance and no development in the town has ever put the burden on the developer to do a traffic study, to do a water study, and to do a sanitary district study. And the burden of developing this whole parcel is under one master development plan. They have interconnectivity of trails in opens. The whole concept is we're getting a lot from this ordinance that has never been done before, and it's not in any ordinances now. And the price we're paying for it is smaller lots and slightly higher density. In my words, slightly higher density.
Why do you have to change the...
We can't have discussion, sir.
Of course not.
Of course not. Thank you. Any comments from the board?
Well, and, you know, I mean, the audience asked what at the public hearing, why didn't people come and speak in favor of it? You know, quite frankly, I've had a lot of people say that this is a very responsible ordinance, this is a good ordinance. You know, you've significantly reduced the density from where we were talking, you know, a couple of years ago. You know, we no longer have light industrial, we no longer have commercial, we no longer have multifamily. You know, we don't even have senior use in here. and it protects the sanitary district. You get the traffic study, but I said, well, why don't you come to the public hearing and talk? Well, they don't want the wrath of their neighbors or the wrath of their community for, coming and being in favor of this, just given the divisive nature of this topic and the divisive nature of politics in general in this country. So that's why they're not, coming and, raising and saying they're in favor of this thing publicly, which, is sad that we're at this point. But, and then, we're throwing out a bunch of numbers, talking about density and I believe we all agree the density of the neighborhood is 1.2, okay? That does not include the lake developments, okay? You talk about, Glen Clove Park, they're at 2.3. The Crystal Spring condos, they're at 2.8. Elmhurst Edition, 2.7. So, I think we're really, really close at, 1.64 as far as, fitting the density of this development. And I think we're really close, and we get the protections of the sewer study, the traffic study, the water study. And again, this is just an overlay ordinance, and they still got to go through all the other steps to develop anything there. I mean, at the end of the day, even if this ordinance is adopted, it's still agriculture, as it was back in 1848, I mean, it's still agriculture.
I would have to concur with some of the things that Mr. Kranek has said. There have been neighbors from where I live that have said that they would not like to see a church, that they would not like to see industrial or any of the commercial uses to it, that they would prefer the homes. I know when we had originally started talking about this particular ordinance, it was near and dear to my heart relative to having some type of safety in there relative to the water. We have seen a number of different developments that have come through, and this was even before my time on the Planning Commission here, with concerns about water. I think that with this particular ordinance, with any development that is there, that is something that will be scrutinized. I think the traffic study, and I will admit I live off of Elmhurst, is also important. And that development, while I may be adjacent to it, that traffic is going to come right past my home. So I think that the traffic study and understanding that is solidified here within this particular ordinance and gives some assurity to the community that as we develop it, it does have more of that residential look. That residential look may be a little bit different than what we have seen in the past, but there are assurances in here that we have written in relative to the traffic and to the water that hopefully will keep things as fairly harmonious as possible.
One question that was asked previously was, what about the sewer system? Is it near capacity with heavy rains currently? What's the criteria for the sewer study?
And again, the sewer study.
Let me answer that.
Okay.
So Lake Pewaukee Sanitary District has indicated to us that their plan for that site was 7 persons per acre. That's the capacity. If you develop the capacity for the pipe, it would be 7 persons per acre that they pre-planned when they were planning their system. So if you take that times the 152 acres, if you considered the whole site, that'd be about 1,000 people. If you're talking about 250 units, the current number of people per unit is, I think, is at about 2.75 or 2.8, somewhere in that range. It used to be 3 about 25 years ago, but now families are getting smaller. And so even if you use 3 times 250, that's 750 people. So on the surface, you would say that, okay, it looks like there's going to be plenty of capacity available based on what the pre-planning that Lake Pewaukee Sanitary District did. However, even if during the study, I mean, we would still require the study, and they say, well, we have a lift station that won't be able to handle it. So then the developer pays for that lift station. Mm-hmm. I would not anticipate that they're going to have to take a increase the pipe by, 6 inches from Delafield all the way to the village of Pewaukee, so you can then send it off to Brookfield. So, I mean, we're talking about maybe a lift station and, if they have to upsize some pipes to get it to a lift station, possibly that. But that's what the study will tell us when that comes up, but you don't know. I mean, they won't do a study. No one wants to do a study until you know how many units. That's the first question that an engineer's gonna say was, well, tell me how many units you're gonna have there, and we'll tell you if it's gonna go, but we don't have that yet.
In the Pewaukee Sanitary District will be intimately involved in the sewer study. And we've talked to them numerous times over the last 4 years. I have personally talked to them numerous times. And keep in mind, this is such a burden on the family, and I know it's a hard concept to understand for these 3 studies and these other requirements, that our attorney is making the family sign and accept this ordinance. And if the family doesn't sign and accept the ordinance, then even if we approve it and pass it, after 90 days, it defaults back to no ordinance. It goes away. So the family still has to agree to this and sign it, all property owners.
She's got some more questions.
Okay.
Oh, no, I was taking notes of questions that we were hearing.
I'm
So
kind of reading them. One says about, there's a question about a berm along Gulf Road. I think we looked at it and said it can be a landscape buffer. And the way I look at that is, yes, it could easily be a berm. It could be a landscape. I think we want to leave the flexibility, once again, up to the developer to do something. But I think our intent is we have set aside that buffer, that 100 feet, so that something can be done to buffer it. But I'm not ruling out a berm potentially all the way around it, if that's what we think is needed at the time. But I personally don't want to see backyards backing up on I-94. So, what else do you have there?
why was there only 50-foot setback on Elmhurst?
I thought there was a bit of a natural barrier there already.
I
some of the
think
tree
so.
lines. And also the depth of the environmental corridor encroaches so much towards Elmhurst that if you moved it back to 100 feet, then they wouldn't be able to get a road in.
I know that this was something that the county had kind of put in place, the
Yeah.
buffer on Elmhurst, so I probably have to defer to Jason on that for sure.
Yeah.
I know that on portions of the east side of Elmhurst, there are large pine trees that block some of the homes. So I don't know if the county took that into account or not, or if it's just been input from the residents. I mean, obviously Glen Cove is more wide open, as well as Gulf Road is more wide open in a lot of areas that they can see, right through. So I don't know if that made a difference in that decision as well.
Tim, can you back up to that side?
Sure. Let's see, where am I?
So with this slide, you have trees and other woodlands to be preserved. If there wasn't an ordinance, would those be required to be preserved, or are they preserved by virtue of the ordinance?
They are preserved as part of the ordinance.
By virtue of the ordinance.
By virtue of this
required
map.
by the ordinance.
No,
by
so I'm
virtue-
saying without it, they could be.
By
cut
virtue
down.
of this map, we are
They do
saying,
the same clear cutting that they've done on others, yes.
yeah,
So basically, the light green areas, the mint
the
green.
very, this in here, this down here, these areas would be preserved. And then the environmental corridor is another element of preservation on a different level,
No, but her question is, if they did straight R3 zoning, could they clear cut the light green?
Yes, they could.
Because it'd be piecemeal.
It was all piecemeal.
Light
No,
green.
the light
And
green, the
these-
wetlands,
these
the
areas in
wetlands and the
here.
environmental corridor are protected at the county level, but the light green is all nice trees that we want to protect, but wouldn't be protected under straight zoning.
So basically when I'm seeing tree line preservation between of 30 feet wide next to the subdivision, so that could be clear cut.
All the light green could be clear cut.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that was my, and then the landscape buffer without the ordinance.
Wouldn't exist. They'd be the minimum, whatever the minimum setbacks are from a county road for a back lot.
What's that?
For Gulf Road?
For just a road, what would a back lot setback from an existing road be? 50 feet?
Our code would allow 20 feet.
20 feet?
Well,
So
I'm
that-
sorry, because if it's a road like Gulf, or if it's Gulf Road, it'd be 50 feet. You're right, right.
Because it's a
But
county
Elm-
road.
From any road.
Elmhurst would
From
be 50?
Elmhurst would be 50 feet.
Okay,
And
so we're
then
doubling that.
can you just explain the primary environmental corridor? What that is on your,
What is it? The darker, it's mainly made up of what they call upland, pretty much forested growth in there. So the lowland, which is more the wetland areas here, that's called lowland environmental corridor, and it could be like wetland floodplain in these areas, natural resource areas, and then the environmental corridor is pretty much the uplands, so it doesn't get as wet, but it's probably a very nice, well, we all know, it's a very nice forested area.
Okay.
Home of the deer, and that's not it's the deer district for Delafield, that's what it is.
turkeys.
Turkeys, deer. And those are defined by the Regional Planning Commission and experts in the field that can go out there and define where exactly that is. And they'll look at the tree species and determine where that boundary actually is. Because as you can see, like this tree line is not in there. I think that the county has been out in the field and determined that those trees are just not good trees. They're not species trees, so they did not say that this had to be retained.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think the only, I want something that you referenced, Commissioner Fitzgerald, absent the ordinance, what are possibilities?
Well, with the mixed use and the low-density residential land use on the parcels, they could come in with, straight R3 zoning. They could come in with business district zoning. They could come in with institutional zoning for a school. Churches are permitted conditional uses in all zoning districts. Senior housing is a permitted conditional use in all residential districts. So we could have any variety of things.
What's out of Madison?
Well, and there is a state law or a state bill last year that if it had passed, could have resulted in 1,600 low-income apartments being available for this parcel. The bill didn't pass last year. I know it didn't pass. We watched it, trust me, we watched it very closely. So there's always the possibility that the state could do something, but that's not the principal reason we're doing this. But if we don't do anything, that could always be a possibility.
Well, with that said, I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the town board the adoption of an ordinance to create Planned Development District Number 1, however, with an amendment to Section 6A, reducing the maximum project density to 230 units unless the extension of Crooked Creek Road, thereby reducing to 222 units in the event Crooked Creek Road develops separately.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
It's time for the town board to get this and hear
Yes.
from our other members of the town board. It's been 4 years and nobody's been able to talk about it at the town board level because it hasn't been there, so.
I'm fine sending it to the town board.
Call a vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Passes.
Item 6, discussion none. Item 7, next meeting, November 1st. Item 8.
Adjournment, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Let's get the hell out of here.
So we're at 230 density, and if the northern lot develops it separately, it's 222.
Okay.
And it'll be ladies and gentlemen, It will be at the town board next Tuesday.